Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Walt Disney's Minecraft Q&A. I clearly don't have a legitimate full title for this series. It's the Q&A series in which I hang out here on the mcmagic.us server, which is a one-to-one scale recreation of Walt Disney World, and I answer your questions regarding everything Disney, ranging from the theme parks to the history to the movies to you name it, to my personal preferences. This week we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to jump right in, and I want to start off with a partial retraction / apology. So last week there was a question regarding how feasible it would be to have Disney Sea, Tokyo's Disney Sea, here in the United States, and I think I gave a pretty generalized answer based on a very limited knowledge of what Disney Sea is. And the user who asked, Wekar, was nice enough to send me a pretty lengthy and in-depth explanation of the differences between Disney Sea and I think your typical Disney theme park. So I want to thank him for that, because it did open my eyes, because I didn't know a lot about Disney Sea, and it was a reminder that as much as I like to learn about Disney history and the Disney theme parks, there's still a lot I don't know about. And I don't know if it totally changes my answer now that I have a better understanding of what Disney Sea is, but I definitely feel like I do have a better understanding of what Disney Sea is. But I think that sort of question of opening another park in Disney World will always sort of raise a debate, because there's so much that goes into it just besides will people like it. Do I think people would like something like Disney Sea here in the United States? Probably. But I think that's just one of many things to consider. But I wanted to thank you, and I want, if anybody sees something that I get wrong or something that I might not have a full understanding of, I love to hear that sort of stuff, because as much as I love talking about Disney, I also really love learning about Disney. Are we compiling all the carts here? We're taking the TTC to the Magic Kingdom the legit way. We're going to go through the Contemporary here at pretty high speeds. Anyway, so let's dive into questions this week, and let's start talking Disney. Oh no, someone's on the track. Austin Gill asks, how come Walt Disney made Oswald the first Disney character instead of Mickey? So there's a little truth to that. If you're thinking the first Disney character in the sense of the first character he's created, then, well, Oswald wasn't really the first. If you mean the first is in the first Disney company character, he wasn't the first either. So the short coffee table story of Oswald is that before Walt Disney made Mickey Mouse and had the Walt Disney Company with his brother Roy, he was doing cartoons, and he had created a cartoon character called the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and they were pretty popular, and they were gaining some traction, and it was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first examples of a commercially successful cartoon character and project that was going on in cinemas. And so the legend that's always told is he went to New York he didn't own the rights to Oswald, you see. It was not uncommon at the time, and it's still not uncommon, the idea that the rights were owned by a company, and he was just producing these cartoons for them, and he was creating everything, but he didn't have the actual rights. And so the story goes that he went to New York to try and negotiate for better pay and more money, because these Oswald cartoons were becoming popular, and the owner of the IP, whose name escapes me at the moment, did almost the exact opposite. He essentially said, Walt, you were going to start making less money, and of course, understandably, Walt rejected this idea, and the solution that the owner had was, well, then we'll get other animators to do it. We don't need you, Walt Disney, to make Oswald, cartoons. People like Oswald for Oswald, not because of you. And so he actually poached a lot of Walt Disney's animators and sort of went on his own way with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And the myth is, well, not the myth, but the legend is that on his train ride back from that meeting is when Walt conceived of the concept of Mickey Mouse, which is, sort of, or at the time it was Mortimer Mouse. And then, the legend is that his wife, Lily Disney, thought Mortimer was sort of an ugly name and came up with Mickey as an alternative. So that's sort of the story. So it wasn't a Disney character because it wasn't until after that happened that Walt realized he needed to own and control. Whoa, what's going on at the Magic Kingdom? He needed to own and control Mickey Mouse totally. And that's when him and Roy formed. At that point, it was going to be the Disney Brothers studio, but then it was later changed to the Walt Disney Studios. And then, of course, later it became the Disney Company when all of these companies were put together. If you want more into that history, I highly suggest Walt Disney: An American Original by Bob Thomas. It's probably, in my opinion, it's the better of Walt's biographies. There seems to be a lightning storm here in the Magic Kingdom today. And that goes into full detail of sort of what went down and the deals that sort of form that. And then the idea is he is now part of the Disney family again because, and I think it was either the late 90s or the early 2000s, through a business deal that involved trading off some aspects of ESPN, Disney reacquired the rights of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and they've sort of reintroduced him to the Disney family. So in a weird way, he's actually one of the latest members of the Disney company, even though he was created so long ago. Let's see. That's a great question, though, because it does really introduce you to a lot of Disney history. Next up, we have Haley Noel C., who asks, what countries would you like to see added to the World Showcase? I thought about this a lot because you think about what's sort of represented. You know, you've got Asian countries with Japan and China, and you've got Morocco, and you've got France. You've got a lot of Europe covered. I think the two pavilions I would love to see is a New Zealand/Australian pavilion. I guess, what would you call it? Oceanic pavilion, sort of get that whole range of that region. And I would love to see a Russian, maybe like that region of the world, a pavilion for that, because I think that was something you just didn't see a whole lot of because Epcot was a product of the 80s and we were still technically in the Cold War, so we didn't have the best relations at that point. So I think that would be cool. Something where we could see a little bit of Russia's culture and other nations around that area that were probably part of the USSR. And then Oceanic, New Zealand and Australia, without a doubt. So that's what I would like to see. Cameras and Legos asks, what do I think is the most controversial ride in Walt Disney World? I think there are two ways to look at that. There's controversial in two ways to describe controversial. I think one that you can look at, I think it's also extremely hard to come up with this sort of answer because I think when you hear it, the controversy is not going to be that big of a controversy, and you'll realize that you sort of have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to find some controversy here. I think one could be considered the Country Bears Jamboree, and I think part of that is because it was created in a much different era, and it hasn't changed much since then. In fact, I don't think it's really changed at all since it opened. And so I think you have songs that, I don't want to say they're not politically correct, because that, I think, infers that they could be like somehow racist or sexist. I think it's just more like they're a little more crude than you would see today for such a family-friendly park. Like there are songs like Blood on the Saddle, stuff like that. If you ever go back, listen to the songs, I think some of them are a little shocking. And I've heard stories of people who walk out on it because they think it's going to be this fun, kid-friendly thing. And by today's standards, it's not considered kid-friendly, though. I don't know. As somebody who's been on it before, I just never really saw a big deal out of it, So that's one way you could look at controversy. Although, again, I mean, look at that. That's not much of a controversy. I think the other would be Stitch's Great Escape. And I think that's controversial for a different reason. I don't think the actual content of the ride is controversial at all. I think what's controversial is that before Stitch's Great Escape was Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter. I think that was a fan favorite. I think that was something that had a niche following, but it was a very vocally supportive following, and I think when it got switched to something more kid-friendly like Stitch's Great Escape, there was sort of a resentment there, and so I think in that sense it could be considered controversial. Let's go on Space Mountain. In fact, this is perfect timing because the next question is from Jeremiah Staub, who says, hey, do you know if there are any real differences between our Space Mountains in America and Space Mountain Mission 2 in Disneyland Paris? There are throughout those 3 Space Mountains, definitely differences and a lot of similarities. For instance, at the core, they are very much the same. They are indoor roller coasters based on space travel. That said, there are a lot of differences, especially between the American Space Mountains and the one in Disneyland Paris. And the most notable from that would be the facades visuals. The original Space Mountain in Disneyland Paris had a very steampunk, Jules Verne era look about it. And that's because Tomorrowland here in the United States was very much representative of the 1950s space, the 1950s take on space and technology, and it was a very American aesthetic. It's very much something from the space race era, and in Paris you didn't really have that as much. You didn't have this Americana 1950s Jetsons style aesthetic that was popular. So rather than try and force it upon people in Paris, they sort of went with the Jules Verne version of the future, which was a lot more retro. And they still sort of have it. They've kind of updated it for Mission 2. It still has very much of a retro look to it, but I think they've added a lot of sort of neon lights and a little bit of that 50s influence to come up with sort of a mix. So it's a little different. Even the Space Mountain here and Disney World and Disneyland are slightly different when it comes down to things like soundtrack. The soundtrack's a little different. I believe, I'm going to butcher his name, Michael Gianco, the composer who composed composed The Incredibles, did a score for Space Mountain that, as far as I know, was in this Disneyland version, but not in the Disney World version yet. So when it comes to very detailed specifics, there are differences between all 3. But at the end of the day, they are Space Mountains. They're indoor space roller coasters. Although the one in Paris, I believe, boards outdoors and then goes indoors, and actually has a really cool sort of way of starting, where here it starts slower and you build up and you go up sort of like a traditional roller coaster, and then you do your first short dive. There, it sort of launches you up a ramp to sort of simulate this idea of launching out of a cannon, which is a throwback to the old science fiction, arguably the first science fiction film, called A Trip to the Moon by Malays? Probably mispronouncing that name too, where they put basically a pod in the shape of a bullet into a big cannon and launched it at the moon. And you get that famous imagery of the bullet hitting the moon in the eyeball. So that's sort of what that was a homage to. But it changes the way the ride is experienced, which I think is really cool. But this is a great question. Now, Cruz Rodriguez has 2 questions, both of them opinion-based. First one, I believe they should bring back the full-scaled Epcot City to Future World, because that would be awesome. Do you agree? And do you believe that the 5th gate should be the gate for the hardcore riders, such as scary roller coasters? Well, I think everyone's got their opinions. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with both. First of all, I don't think the actual Epcot that Walt envisioned would be possible today. I just think he conceived it at a time where it might have been possible because of both the state of corporations in America and the state of technology and its growth. It was much slower for things to advance, and companies, I think, were a lot more open about sharing those advancements, and I think those 2 things would have been essential in making something like Epcot a reality. Today, that doesn't exist. Today, you've got a new cell phone every 3 months, and the companies will keep it an absolute secret until the day they announce it. And I think if you've got those, if you have those roadblocks, Epcot, the way it was originally intended to be sort of the model city of the future, can't happen because you can't have those futuristic things ahead of time. Can you make it a functional city? Sure, but then I think it'd just be any other functional city that just might have some cool municipal, infrastructure, but I think that's only a part of what would really be Epcot. And then for the 5th gate, I don't agree that there should be a park that is specifically aimed at hardcore riders, because I think that just goes against the spirit of Disney. the spirit of Disneyland was it was supposed to be a theme park for all ages and for all types of people. That includes little kids who can't ride roller coasters. That includes older people who can't ride roller coasters. So while I think every theme park should have a roller coaster, sort of the same way the Magic Kingdom's got roller coasters, Hollywood Studios has them, Epcot's got thrill rides, is that it shouldn't be a focus. It should always be, the park should always have something for everybody, and that sort of rules out the concept of a extreme theme park, quote unquote. But you know, I don't run Disney, and you know, everyone's got their opinions, and who knows what they're going to do. Walt doesn't run Disney either anymore, so that doesn't rule out that it can happen down the line. Jordan Mann asks, I've read that there was supposed to be a Venetian-themed and a Persian-themed hotels in the Magic Kingdom monorail loop. Am I right? If so, why was it never built? Well, you are absolutely right. There was actually 3 hotels that were planned to be built on the Seven Seas Lagoon. In fact, why don't we'll loop back to the beginning, especially because there seems to be a lightning storm here. We'll loop back to the beginning of the Magic Kingdom, and we'll ride that monorail loop. But yes, there was going to be a Venetian-themed hotel, a Persian-themed hotel, and an Asian-themed hotel. They never happened. All 3 were canceled for the same reason, and that was the 1973 oil crisis. Because of that, oil prices were way up, and because of that, they were feared that guest attendance would be way down in those years because gas was super expensive, hard to come by, and that was still at a point in time where commercial flight was becoming a lot more popular, but it wasn't the go-to way to get around. A lot of people drove to these theme parks. So the idea of expanding on their park capacity through hotels was sort of axed, and they were just never really picked up again. Now, essentially, when Eisner took over in the late 80s, early 90s, there was plans to build a a hotel resort that would be a competitor to the Grand Floridian, and that was going to be a Mediterranean-themed resort, and that was going to be in between the Transportation and Ticket Center and the Contemporary Resort. The reason that ended up getting canned was because the groundwork and the terrain actually just was not very conducive for building, and it caused a lot of problems, and the project was eventually abandoned. Now, obviously, we all know that didn't stop Eisner's goal of expanding the number of rooms on property, because then we got so many other hotels, they just never ended up being on the Seven Seas Lagoon. And I think once you saw the bus system put into place, I think the desire to make all these new hotels on the Seven Seas Lagoon sort of was reduced, especially because you also had all these other parks opening like Epcot and Hollywood Studios, where all of a sudden this loop around the monorail with the Seven Seas Lagoon wasn't the only place to find what was essentially Disney World. You got to remember, before Epcot, this was it. Like, yeah, there were other things in Disney World, like campgrounds and golf courses, but the bulk of it were the hotels and the Magic Kingdom, and they were all located here. So this seems like it goes the long way, so let's go for a ride. But yeah, it would have been cool to see. And I think for a while, I think there wasn't a need to replace the Asian theme hotel, because while it isn't totally Asian, it's just Pacific Asian. You have the Polynesian hotel, which isn't like a one-to-one copy of the theme, but I think it carries over some of those aesthetics to make it feel like a suitable alternative. That was a fantastic question. Next up, we have Chris Roke. In Universal, Orlando has its Marvel section. Do you think Disney gets anything from that? Do you think Disney will take it? I don't think Disney will take it. Do I think they get anything? They might get, royalty fees from it. Here's my understanding. I am not a lawyer, so take everything I'm saying with a big grain of salt, and I don't believe any of these details are public, so everything's sort of based on he said, she said, and from people who work there. But I believe the way it works is currently Universal has an agreement with Marvel, back when Marvel was its own company, that was in perpetuity, which means essentially that Universal are the ones who get to decide when they no longer hold the rights. As long as they're willing to pay for them, they can continuously pay for the rights for these Marvel characters for their attractions, which tells me that they'll probably never give it up, because why would they give up all these attractions if Disney's only going to make Marvel more popular then it's only going to benefit them. Now, there's obviously the chance that Disney could buy out that contract, but I imagine it would cost far too much money for them to consider it. And then on top of that, you're going to buy it out, and then you have to put all that stuff in Disney World. I think at the end of the day, you know, it would just be easier and more profitable for them to just allow Universal to continue to do that Marvel stuff. Now, there aren't restrictions regarding Marvel attractions elsewhere in the world, which is why there's a lot of rumors now that you're going to see a Marvel theme park in Europe, because they're sort of free to do it because it's not in the contract. And hey, you might see it in that case, but I don't think you're going to see any Marvel rides that are covered in Universal in Disney World for a long time. Now, there's also talk that contract supposedly covers certain characters and properties of Marvel, so there's a chance you might see Marvel rides in Disney World that just aren't, you know, Spider-Man or the Hulk or the Avengers and things like that. So I don't know what that would end up being. I'm not a big Marvel person, so I don't know where they can dip into, but I'm sure there's plenty there. Let's see. Mr. Disney World fan says, if you were manager or someone big at the Disney company, what would you like to see refurbished, removed, or added in Epcot? Oh boy. Okay, so we're gonna go to Epcot now, actually, on the monorail. Is this the wrong way? Maybe it's the right way. We'll find out. So the question there, I'm going to go through it very quickly. I'm not going to go into detail because it's its own video. I could do a full, I think, hour-long video on what I think we could do to Epcot, but I'm going to run through it rapid fire, okay? Ready? I would refurbish Spaceship Earth again. I would rewrite the script so it was more intelligent, similar to the Jeremy Irons version, but you could keep Judi Dench. I would remove that post-show bit where you put in the answers, because I feel like that post-show, more specifically, not post-show, but it's at the end of the ride. I think that's too much of a focus on life in the future and not communication in the future. So I would just refurbish it to be something, I think, a little more specific to communication. I would gut all of Innoventions, and I would turn it into a permanent, all-year-round trade show for consumer electronics, where companies can show upcoming products similar to the way that they would at CES or E3 or anything like that. And just, I think there needs to be more of a focus on something that we could see tangibly in our lifetimes within the next couple of years, as opposed to things like greenhouses where, you know, so many people in the country today might not even own a house but rent an apartment. Universal Energy, give that an update. Keep it focused on energy. Reopen the health pavilion, the body pavilion, and put an increased focus on how our technology is integrating into health and both body improvements, things like prosthetics or things like using apps to get healthy. I think there should be a focus on that, and you throw rides in there. I would remove Mission Space completely, get rid of it. Put a new ride there that's a spiritual successor to Horizons that has more of a focus on living in space and traveling in space and what that could be like for us in the future. Don't make a cheap thrill ride about taking off and a rocky landing. I think that's sort of intellectually empty, and that's sort of a disservice to what Horizons was, which was the exact opposite. Test Track, I haven't ridden the new one, so I can't comment on it. Moving on to the other side, I can't think of any real tangible changes to the Sea Pavilion. I think Soarin' can go. I know everyone loves it. I just don't think it has any relevance to what life, what does it have to do with the future and the land, you know? I think living in the land is more of a testament to Epcot's mission statement than Soarin' is, because at least it talks about how we use technology to harness the land to our benefit. So I'd get rid of Soarin' and put something a little more future focused there. And then the Imagination Pavilion, I think that would be something that would be fantastic for a company like Google to sponsor. You know what? People are going to hate me for saying this, but let's just get rid of the Dreamfinder altogether. Put a brand new ride. Get rid of Captain EO, because I think that was a cash grab because Michael Jackson died. Just redo that whole pavilion and put a focus on using imagination to create innovation with technology in the world today, and highlight some of the ways that's happened, and, you know, think of ways we can do that in the future. Maybe throw some references to the Dreamfinder in there because everyone likes those characters. So that's what I would do to Future World in a nutshell. People would probably hate me for it, but there you go. And if you ever want to hear me go more into detail, if there's enough demand, I might do like a full episode where I cover each pavilion way more in depth and explain my reasoning better. But that's what I would do with Epcot. And then add those countries I said to World Showcase. Moving on. Cameron Benway asks, in a non-related question about Disney World, do you ever think Disney would buy out gaming companies such as Sega and Nintendo? If so, how would you react? My answer is no, I don't think they would. If you need evidence to that, just look at Lucasfilm. They acquired Lucasfilm, and part of that was acquiring LucasArts, and the first thing they did was shut it down. I think Disney, the only interest in gaming that they have, personally, to themselves, is mobile gaming. Where's my water? Where's the Agent P version and the Where's My Mickey and stuff like that, because it's more financially successful. I think if you look at their attempts at video gaming on a broader scale, like Epic Mickey, for instance, I mean, look what happened. Epic Mickey didn't do great, and then Epic Mickey didn't do great at all, and then they ended up closing that studio as a result. They had a company, Disney Interactive, that they were using Jerry Bruckheimer as sort of a producer, and they were doing Split Second, was a pretty good racing game, but they ended up closing that studio because they just didn't manage it correctly. I think Disney, for all of its things that it does well, they're not really good when it comes to video games, and so I don't think they'll ever have interest in buying a company like a Nintendo or a Sega. I think they'd be much more interested in just making deals like they did. They made a deal with Activision to be the exclusive publisher for Star Wars related games on consoles for like the next 10 years or something. You know, they're really good at finding people who are talented at something and giving them the task of making something talented. And in some cases, if they prove how successful it is, like Pixar, they just buy it outright. I don't think you're going to see that, though, with video gaming. Not anytime soon. And then to end off the episode, there are a couple of, personal questions. MW Giannini asks, what's your favorite restaurant theme? My favorite 3 restaurants are the Sci-Fi Drive-In, the theater in the Hollywood Studios, the drive-in restaurant, followed by the 50s Primetime Cafe, and then lastly, it's the Starlight Cafe in Tomorrowland with Sunny Eclipse, which is actually it's not a table service restaurant, it's a counter service, but I love the theming there. So I think if there's a common theme at these with these restaurants, is I like the 50s and I like science fiction. A little secret for you guys. So those are my favorite restaurants. And then lastly, let's go to Warp Epcot. Brian Figgs asks, have you ever done or plan on doing one of the special Disney tours, for example, the Wild African Check? I haven't ever, but I do plan on it. Next time I go, I want to do Keys of the Kingdom and there's a Future World tour. I want to do both of them. The Future World tour, I think, is like 5 hours, so clearly I have to go on a vacation where, like, maybe when it's a big group of friends, so I can basically go off on my own, because I imagine I'm the only Disney nerd who would follow a tour for, 6 hours out of my friends, where if I go with like one person, they'd either have to come with me or I'm like abandoning them for the day. But I do want to do them. Actually, it's funny, my best friend's getting married in January, and she's honeymooning in Disney. So I got her and her fiance as a wedding gift. I got them the Keys of the Kingdom tour because, they'll be in Disney, and I figured they do like Disney enough that I think they'd enjoy it. And I'm actually using them as the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, by, they will report to me if it's a tour worth doing or not. So hopefully next year I will get to experience those tours and more. In any case, this has been Minecraft Disney's Q&A. Every week I do this. If you've got questions for me regarding Disney World, Disneyland, the rides, the history, the cartoons, you name it, throw them my way, and I always try to answer them. Even if I don't answer it here on the show, I do try to get into the comments and answer everything that's sort of thrown my way, even if it's just replying through comment. So feel free to ask whatever's on your mind. And have a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. And hopefully I will see you all here next week for the next episode of the Minecraft Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.